I got the Q-Link pendant, that seemed to boost my meditation a little bit. If I wear amethyst crystals, that seems to, or kunzite crystals, especially amethyst though, that seems to boost my meditation quite dramatically actually. But one of the most dramatic things I've done to increase my meditation capacities and abilities is to carry out magnetic therapy, and that just means get the right kind of magnets and apply them to your skin, apply them to your body. What I do is I have a magnetic pillow I sleep with every night, and when I got that magnetic pillow years ago now, I noticed that my abilities to meditation increased several fold. It just became easier and more natural to me, and to the egotistical consciousness was more easily disintegrated in my meditation work and so forth. And so that really got me thinking that there's obviously magnetic variations that happen, and this has to do with the pole shifts and all this kind of stuff that everybody talks about, the crustal shifts. But the big deal is magnetic field variations occur on Earth for any number of reasons that we can theorize. So the natural theory would be there is if they do, then that means human consciousness will vary possibly quite dramatically as well. And I've got, well, in my eyes, proof to me that this magnetics affect consciousness dramatically due to magnetic therapy. So what Cliff is talking about is that the 2012 events are going to dramatically charge the magnetosphere of the Earth, as Cliff says it. So that means that following 2012, we're going to be living in an environment of dramatically increased magnetism, which should, you would think, dramatically affect consciousness, elevate it, and possibly bring us into a golden age. And this sort of follows right from Cruttenden's work, where he discusses how magnetism is possibly involved with the alterations in consciousness. He doesn't discuss that so directly. And when he was on the show here a couple months back, he almost, I think, kind of didn't really even want to discuss that too much, and was afraid to postulate that. But with magnetic therapy, I've got no fear in postulating that, because I see that that's exactly what happens. So again, to restate the issue, if magnetism is going to be dramatically increased in our world after 2012, consciousness should be dramatically increased as well. And this golden age that Cliff High has forecasted and projected for after the 2012 events, just a dramatic golden age is to start. It should be because of this recharging of the magnetics here on Earth that caused this to happen. So that's a pretty good introduction to the WebBot project and Cruttenden's work. And as I'm going to discuss here, if you combine the two, we get a whole new view of reality, I guess. I mean, I'm not trying to be dramatic when saying that. Maybe that's too extravagant to say it that way. It's just we have a new way of looking at reality, building on Cruttenden's work and Cliff High's work. So let me talk about Garrell a little bit here first before we get into this more. Patrick Garrell. I've been talking about Pat Garrell for some time. I was pretty interested when I heard Cliff High of the WebBot project talk about him on the Rent show from November 3. What I've noticed that's interesting about Garrell is in the first pages of his book, let me grab it off the shelf here. It's called The World Cataclysm in 2012, The Maya Countdown to the End of the World. I got this book a couple years ago, and I was pretty impressed with it. It's very technical. Reminds me of some of the physics books that I had to read when I was in college. It's that tedious. You have to really read through it. It's worth it. It's mathematics is very elegant. It's worth the work and reading through it. But anyway, I think it's the first page on the book. In the book, on the very bottom of the first page, Garrell discusses how sunspots, the Mayans predicted sunspots will vanish right before the 2012 event. And the thing is the book was published in 2005, so that means that he was writing this book, in 2004 and before. And so this is 2004 to 2005 that he would write that, and there was no indication of sunspots decreasing in activity in any way. it was then in 2007 and 8 that sunspot activity went to a shocking decrease, and we had the record amount of time for no sunspots, and it alarmed a lot of people, and it was very unusual and signified a huge cooling phase of the sun. And it was just a solar activity that was never seen before. So that made a pretty big impression in my mind that this guy Garrel was onto something. If he can make that kind of a prediction, then something to do with his work is true. And I've studied his work quite a bit since then, and it looks like Cliff High, the Webbot, has been too. So it's definitely to be taken seriously when you can make that kind of a prediction. That's better than any predictions I've seen anybody out of academia make. That's for sure. Academia just talks about predictions and never makes any in general. So now let me just stress, I don't know if these ideas are right. All I know is that I've studied the Webbot project in incredible depth, and I've studied Cruttenden's work in incredible depth, including having him on the show for a 2-hour broadcast, and I've studied Garrel's work in incredible depth all through the years. And if you combine all this, you come up with this view that I'm about to give you about history and our future in 2012. So again, this is theoretical work. This is not empirical research. So just take that in mind. The future will tell if this is true or not. It's probably a correct theory because it's not that. I mean, it follows so closely to the Webbot research, and it just basically tacks on Cruttenden's theories to the Webbot research. So it's probably a correct theory, but I just want to make sure you know that we're talking in theoretical terms, and I'm not trying to prove some point here. This is just exploration. Now, Cruttenden talks about these cycles recurring over and over through history, and the times of the cycling are roughly something like 9,000 to 11,000 years. Now that sounds kind of familiar to what Cliff was talking about last night on the Rents radio show when he was discussing the 2012 solar issues and crustal shift issues, when he was saying, you know, something around 11,500, 11,800 years is the cycle for these solar events and crustal shifts to happen. So you start to wonder. Now, Cruttenden's got a whole lot of empirical analysis, which he has in his book, and he's not as strong on this as I am, but when he was on the show, I was just saying his book was an astounding empirical account, a very scientific account. So I just find it interesting that Cruttenden's time frames and Cliff High's time frames are rather similar. So if we go the next step and say, well, they're both talking about the same cycle, Cliff's 2012 solar cycle discussions and Cruttenden's golden year are describing the same cycle of history, and it's all based on the fluctuations of consciousness with respect to the level of magnetism that the Earth involves and the corresponding decrease or increase in consciousness.